Well, so I think that's, a really difficult question because the challenges have evolved over time quite a bit. So for the last 25 years, there have been different challenges at different points in time to peace building in Somalia, peace building and state making at the same time. But, if I were to maybe just highlight three particular challenges, I would maybe say that, first of all, the heavy-handed military signature that international approaches have carried to resolving the conflict in Somalia have certainly not been, very constitutive to peace building and state making in Somalia, just because, it has drawn the focus to issues that are not necessarily at the heart of peace building and state making. Mm-hmm. And so this has started, of course, with the 1990, the UN backed and US-led intervention in the early 1990s, and goes right through to, the international war on terror that has very strongly influenced the engagement of the AU and the AMISOM peacekeeping troops. Secondly, I would say that a key issue for peace building in Somaliland has been the fragmentation of the Somali society. So basically, we do not only have to deal with a fragile state, but also a very fragile society, which has been fragmented along kinship lines or regional issues, throughout the years. And countering that fragility, this social fragmentation, building up a greater unity and social cohesion among the people is, I think, a key stepping stone towards, building greater peace in Somalia. So I think the third element that has been inhibiting peace building in Somalia and Somaliland has been the multiplicity of actors involved, both on a national and an international level, right? Mm-hmm. So the changing alliances and the different agendas that have been come with this multiplicity of actors has been very difficult for international, peace builders and national state builders to bring under one head and to actually then establish greater levels of peace and security. Well, I think it depends on what you're particularly looking at, because the lessons that can be drawn from Somaliland are quite numerous. But then I think there are a few key lessons that one can possibly learn. First of all, I think one of the key lessons Somaliland shows is that state building and peace building are inherently political rather than a matter of public administration. The international community has spent lots of efforts actually on administering the Somali crisis and administering, with a double E basically, the Somalis out of fragility. But public administration is quite confined in order to provide answers to peace building and state building challenges, because peace building and state building are inherently conflictual, erratic, and change over time, right? And therefore I think that's a key insight that comes out of Somaliland. A second key insight that might be taken from Somaliland is that not necessarily, all good things go together. As we can see in the Somaliland case, peace has at times been sacrificed for state building to go ahead, and at times there were quite autocratic structures of governance in order to bring state building forward. Hence, we might have to recognize that, in international peace and state building, there are hard choices that need to be made. And I think, we have to learn that for the case of Somalia, and that's definitely a lesson that comes out of Somaliland. Finally, maybe, is that there is no really preconceived process of, getting a country on track of state building. Somaliland had the possibility and ultimately found its own way to build up a reasonably peaceful and reasonably stable state. And we need to give countries maybe greater latitude in finding their own ways rather than trying to build states by copy and paste solutions. Mm-hmm. Which then also is, of course, a note of caution towards wanting to learn too much from Somaliland, because even though Somaliland, renders important insights, it would be wrong, I think, to just do a copy and paste in order to try, to save Somalia, because the context in Somalia and its history and trajectory have been so different from the one in Somaliland that we can, at the one side learn some lessons, but we shouldn't do copy and pasting, mm-hmm. because that would not lead to a fruitful solution, I think. So I think what the Somali case teaches, to start with a no-brainer basically, is that context matters a lot. That is kind of like, generally well accepted, but then often frequently neglected when we look at negotiation processes, that the context and the evolving context over time matters so much that we have to understand those contexts first before we can possibly have a positive effect on those negotiations or mediations, right? Secondly, I would just come back to a point made earlier on about not all good things necessarily going hand in hand. There are really kind of like, different ways to approach peace building and state building. They're at times mutually exclusive or mutually, antagonistic towards each other. And I think that needs to be recognized, and those tough choices I was talking about earlier on need to be made, knowing well the consequences of each path one can possibly take. But the Somali case, I think, clearly illustrates how not all good things can possibly go together. One further aspect that one can learn from Somali mediation efforts is that mediation is not the only game in town. As important as mediation efforts have been in Somalia, I think it has become quite apparent that there are also other variables and factors playing a huge role in deciding the outcome of peace building and state making efforts. That much goes back to entrenched power politics and vested interests, and that mediation can try to influence these matters, but that in the end it really kind of like hinges on the key actors to hammer out a political settlement that can bring a country forward.